Welcome everyone to our very special event that I've been looking forward to for a while now. My name is Kate Sung. I'm the pastor of worship here at New Life Fellowship. And what I've been trying to do for the past year is just to get in contact with our many creatives that are members of New Life and have been attending New Life, and to try to develop an artistic community so that we can contribute, brainstorm with one another, and just hear from one another. And one of the artists at New Life that have been attending New Life for a very long time now is Helen Sung, who I want to introduce you today. If you are not familiar with Helen, she is a world-renowned composer, pianist, educator. She does so many different things. She's mainly in the area of jazz, and she's just released many albums and just plays all around the world with people that you've heard of. And it's such an honor to have a conversation with her today and just to share her music with us today, because I don't think we've ever done this before. And so I just want to introduce Helen. And Helen, welcome to this conversation, and thank you so much for agreeing to do the concert for us. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Kate. Thanks for having me. And it's so nice to just get a chance to visit with you and talk about music, something that we both love and have a life in. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's such an honor to have this kind of dedicated space to talk to you, because it's really hard to see you on Sundays. Well, I don't see anyone on Sundays anymore. But even when we were meeting, it was hard to catch you because you have a busy schedule, and I'm sure a lot of times on Sundays it's hard for you to attend. So tell us how long you've been coming to New Life. When did you start coming? Why did you stay? What's going on?
I don't know how old I am if I do that.
That's okay.
This is my 21st year of living in New York City, which is crazy. I think I've lived longer here than anywhere else now by now. But so I was visiting different churches when I first moved to New York City, and my former landlady, the place where I used to live, she told me about, because I moved in with a old I'm from Texas, and I had an old friend from Texas who would just happen to be living in Elmhurst, and I didn't know anything about New York City. I was finishing school up in Boston, and the landlady told me about, there's a church right up the street. And so I'll never forget that Sunday, Pastor Pete Scazzaro, and he gave a sermon about being a sequoia tree, about how unique that tree is and the root system and how hardy it is, and wanting the desire of being a Christian that is like a sequoia tree. And he just, he got me. Like, I would say, wow, this is the place I want to be. So that's how I started attending New Life. 20 years now, 20 plus years.
Wow. Wait, so was that when we were back in Corona, or it was still after we had come to Elmhurst?
It was at the Elks Lodge, but it was when the New Life was still renting the space, and there would be like wrestling matches in that space on Saturday nights.
That's right. Good times. And Peter,
I heard it'd just be a nightmare to clean up the space. So I went through the whole, are we going to buy the space? Are we not? And the whole campaign. So it's just been such a journey. And then we were like the guinea pigs for the first iterations of emotionally healthy spirituality.
Yes.
For the fancy books and stuff.
That's right.
So, gosh, time passes so quickly.
Yes, it does. I wanted to ask you, Helen, because I've talked to you about this before, but how did you first become interested in jazz piano specifically? Because I know you have a classical background. And so what happened, and how did you get into that world?
So I started classical piano and violin when I was 5. And my parents were not typical Asian parents in the point that they didn't really want to see us pursue that career. They just said, okay, well, this is something Helen is showing interest in as a young child. And so I studied classical piano and violin all through school, all through high school. And then I decided I wanted to keep studying classical piano. And although I don't know that I verbalized it to myself in this way back then, it's just I realized somehow on a gut level that music was something I would never get to the end of, and something I would never be bored with. So I wanted to study it, even though my parents didn't want me to. So I ended up going to UT Austin, University of Texas, hook 'em horns. And I was kind of devastated to go there, to be honest, because I had dreams of going to Juilliard or the Eastman School of Music or, one of the fancy conservatories. But I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and my parents, practical immigrant parents, are like, we're not going to go into debt just for an undergrad education. And so, so I was so depressed because UT was like my backup of school. But now I know if I had gone to one of those fancy conservatories, I would never have been exposed to jazz.
Wow.
I went to a high school in Houston where many of the great jazz artists on the scene today are from, but I had no interaction with the jazz folks at all. I was like such a strict classical major. So I went to UT, and I had a good friend who was a year older than me, but I just kind of was following in her steps, like which classes to take and stuff. And then she one night she said to me, Helen, let's go. Harry Connick Jr. is in town. He's going to have a concert. And I was like, who's that? I was such a typical, I won't say typical. I was such classical nerd, just in the practice room 6 to 8 hours a day, just didn't listen to any other kinds of music. And she says, don't worry, he's really handsome. You'll like him. So we went, and he was very entertaining. And yes, he was very handsome. And he had his big band and he sang. But in the middle of the concert, he sat down and played some solo piano. And I remember feeling like struck by lightning, because he was playing that piano with a ferocity and energy that I had not witnessed before. And I remember thinking 2 things. I didn't know you were allowed to play the piano like that.
Wow.
2, how come no one told me about this? But you know what? I think I just wasn't ready until then. So then after that, I wasn't thinking, oh, I want to switch, but I said, I want to know more about this music. So I didn't know any jazz musicians. So I just went to the UT Music Library and started checking out books. And luckily they were the right books, and listening to recordings as a result of that. And I begged the jazz piano professor at UT for lessons. I was really lucky. Jazz education back then was not as established as it is now. So it was small program, not too many students. And so I was just kind of thrown into the deep end because they needed students to play in their ensembles. And I think that was the best way for me to be introduced, because otherwise I would probably always just poke my toe in and take it out, dip my toe in and take it out. So it just started like that. The more I found out about jazz music, the more I realized this is such a profound art form that deserves the same kind of dedication and respect that classical music does. And I didn't want to be just a dilettante, just I could play the notes because I had the classical chops, but the swing, that unique contribution of rhythm, that rhythmic contribution that I think is unique to jazz, I really wanted to get that. And then one thing led to the other, and I got accepted into a program called the Thelonious Monk Institute of Jazz Performance. And it was the first class they ever had. It was in Boston at the New England Conservatory, and that's what brought me to the East Coast. And I really credit that program with putting me on the path I am today, because they modeled it after the way jazz had been taught up till then, which was master to apprentice. So we didn't really have classes. It was just 7 students, and they would bring in all the jazz masters to work with us a week, 2 weeks at a time. So it was crazy. It was a crazy 2 years, because people on my CDs would be standing right in front of me telling me stuff about the music and about my playing. I mean, it was a real, again, just thrown into another even deeper end, but I'm so grateful and just really thankful for that experience. Really once in a lifetime experience.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Just you and 7 students just learning like that. Oh my goodness. And that's how you got into jazz. I love that story. Just love it, love it, love it. 'Cause do you meet people that have classical music backgrounds that found their way into jazz, or is that really rare?
Actually, it's not that uncommon even for the jazz masters. People like Miles Davis and Thelonious Monk, and they all had classical training. Bud Powell, And some of them were even in conservatory and got in trouble for playing jazz in the practice rooms. Believe it or
Really?
not. So even today, there's even more. So I do encounter, I would say not a lot, but quite a few.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And then I'm just trying to imagine, had you not pursued jazz, what your life would be like now.
Oh, well, I'm so grateful. I really feel like jazz was something that helped me become a better, if not the best version of who I could be.
Oh, that's so awesome. That's so
Classical
awesome.
music, I totally respect that art form, but personally for me, it accentuated my worst characteristics, the competitiveness and the perfectionism, which I think if I had stayed in that, I would be a very different person. Like jazz is such an honest music. It's so generous. It's the incredibly generous art form. I think it really reflects the people that it comes from, the African Americans. Um, and in terms of honesty, I mean, like it requires, because it's improvisation, right? So it's you. So I really had to look inside, and this is terrifying and it's not, and it's not just a one-time thing. It's over and over again. Like, do I have something to say with this? And what do I want to say? And those are terrifying questions, but it's just, they're very real and relevant questions, I think, not just in music. So I'm incredibly, like I said, you'll probably hear me say it many times, incredibly grateful to be in the music.
Oh, that was so good, Helen. I definitely want to come back to that. I guess so. Now that you've been doing this for many, many years, you have a lot of, or not that many years, but enough to say that you're a veteran.
Yes.
What are some of the things that have brought you life in your, field of work, and some difficulties, maybe challenges that you've faced?
Well, I still am who I am, right? So the perfectionism and the competitiveness, because, a career in the arts is not easy. Because if it was, I think everybody would want to be an artist, because we get to play for a living, right? That's nuts. Sometimes I feel like, I would almost do this for free. Get paid for it. It's it's crazy. And so it's hard in that there's no blueprint for you do this, you do that, and you become a quote, a doctor or a lawyer. Everybody's path is different. And then there's just the opportunities are not, guaranteed. And so it's a music that keeps me very just close to the ground, let's say, just humble, the humility, right? But it's such, like I said before, it's such an incredibly generous art form, and to have found a place in it, I feel so grateful. And it's jazz versus classical, where especially classical piano, which is such a solitary art form, even when you're playing with like a string quartet or an orchestra, piano is very much the focus. Like the orchestra is there to accompany you, and you're always by yourself in the practice room. And that's one huge paradigm shift for me mentally and musically. Like jazz is music made with people, and you're encountering people who are different from you, who hear things different than you and feel things different than you, and to have to come together and make music together on the spot in the moment. Like I remember thinking in my, like the way I would approach a classical performance, I would say, okay, well, go through it. This has to happen and this has to happen and blah, blah, blah. And that's a good performance. And I would go to the jazz band stage like that too. And I still struggle with it. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, because you actually have to deal with the people you're playing with in real time. And it's not about what you want to see happen. It's what happens, right? And Jimmy Heath, he was a great tenor saxophonist. He was the best. He had the best sayings, right? Like I remember when I was a student, he was one of the teachers that came through. He was like, okay, Helen, now, and no BS now, because if you BS your way in, you're going to have to BS the whole rest of the way. And I was like,
Wow.
whoa. But then another thing I love that he said for him, the bandstand with the jazz band is where true democracy in its ideal form, because exists because everybody comes together. You have a role that you have to understand and your responsibilities, and you have to meet those. And everybody gets a chance to say something in their solos. And it's really, I think, reflective of, this music comes from the African American experience where their voice was silenced for essentially hundreds of years, 400 years. And this incredibly beautiful art form, I think it's a reason why it's so incredibly strong. It's from the origins, this art form would put a priority in giving everybody their voice, but yet in the end, you do something, you together with the band, you create something bigger than you could do on your own. So that's something that I just find so inspiring and just a continual challenge. Like it's such a holistic, earthy art form, and one final thing, it's just another thing I never thought I would do as a classical musician. I never thought about writing music. I was always thinking, well, composers write the music, composers compose the music, and I play the music. And when I was at the Monk Institute, I realized, oh my God, we were expected to write music. And the artistic director of the program when I was there is the bass legend, Ron Carter. And he said to us, if you want to find your voice in this music, you need to write your own music. So we would have to have a new piece ready every time he came through, which was once every 2 weeks. And the students, the 7 students, we formed a band, actually. It was a jazz septet. We would play it, he would critique it, and this is something I found that I love doing, and I never, ever thought I would write music that I would want to play, or record. So that's another huge just source of life and joy.
Oh, that's so awesome and beautiful. There's so many things I had thoughts as you were saying all those things. I'm very interested in a few different things that you do, and I'm sorry if this is a question that you get a lot, but as a woman in a field maybe dominated by men, and also as an Asian American in a field that not many Asian Americans go into, what has that experience been like for you?
It definitely has its challenges in terms of lack of opportunity and I remember one time I was waiting for a rehearsal to start, and I was sitting on the piano bench, and one of the musicians came in and said, "Where's the pianist?" So, there's that stereotype, well, if you're a female, you must be the vocalist. And but Jimmy Heath, again, oh my God, I find myself when I do things like that, I keep coming back to him. Like he said to me, Helen, the things that you might think work against you can also be your secret weapon because you're unique. So my stance since I moved to New York was I don't want to dwell on the woman in jazz issue. I don't want to talk about it. I want my playing to speak for itself, and that's it. And I just want to be there because of my playing. And over time, I feel like that was one way to approach it, but probably not complete, because I think being a woman is, you have to acknowledge that, right? So I think one thing I realized, one of the things was, as I get older, which I don't like thinking about because it sucks to be a grown-up. But I was really inspired by an interview I read by not Q-Tip, sorry. God, who's the guy with the cone? Questlove.
Yes.
No, is that right? Questlove from The Roots, the guy with the pick in his hair?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yes. So I was really inspired by an interview I read by Questlove of The Roots. He was talking about how he was speaking about himself. Like he couldn't always just be the acorn, right? Like at some point he has to grow into this tree to benefit other musicians and be a source of whatever, community nurturing. And I think I want to always stay that acorn, because I just want to be always the up and comer, and don't expect too much out of me, and don't just give me my I'm always on the verge of I want to on the verge of something big, but I taught at Juilliard for some years, and I was the first female jazz faculty there. And there was a young woman student who had wanted, I didn't know this till after I had left, um, who had wanted access to me because she was feeling very discouraged by the program there. I think she was one of two students. And, but they told her, she was an undergrad, and then they told her, well, Helen only teaches, she's only teaching a graduate course. So, but I knew about her, and it was really amazing. I had an opportunity to do a Zoom webinar with some women in jazz, and she was there. And I told her, I actually apologized to her. I said, when I was teaching at Juilliard, it was one of many things I was doing. I was just like in and out, blah, blah, blah. But I should have sought you out, because I know how tough it is to be as a woman in jazz, and I should have sought you out to just affirm you. But I was able to do it there, and it was such a powerful moment. So I think part of that is, I'm mentoring for an organization called Women in Jazz organization, mentoring a young pianist. And it's scary being in that role because, I've had not the best experiences with some teachers. I see the power that teachers exert in a student's life. And it makes me very careful about just because I never, how do I say this? Because I feel like this perfectionism and competitiveness, I won't say, I'm not speak for everybody, but it's in a lot of musicians. So I see the darkness in me where I would want to, like, I don't know what, to put a cap on someone or try to stop them, or it's an awful thing, but there's that dark side, and it can come out really quickly when you're teaching, because this is my experience, because these students, I remember a colleague said, yeah, we're teaching these people to take our gigs in the future.
Ooh, what a way to put it.
No, but I think it's very honest. That's the real bluntness of jazz I appreciate. So it's like, that's again just keeping me close to the ground. So like that. So maybe I went off a little off topic from the whole woman in jazz.
That's so great, though. That's so great.
But yeah, just being a woman in jazz, like accepting that role and wanting to be part of the solution, because the challenges that women face in jazz music are no different than any other field. It's just, and I try to remember that and not be bitter. It's the set of challenges I have to deal with, and I'm going to deal with it, and I want to be part of the solution.
That's great. That's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. That was really powerful. That leads me to kind of just wondering, one of the questions I wanted to ask you was about your faith and how that kind of plays out in your field. How did you become Christian, or when did you become Christian? And what does that look like, as you do what you do on a daily basis?
When did I become Christian? That's a tough question. I think that's TBA. And what I mean by that is when I was 9, I'm sure my grandmother had good intentions. She scared me into becoming, quote unquote, a Christian. This horrible story of someone who didn't accept Jesus at a revival meeting, and then it's a totally made up story, because when you think about it, it makes no sense. But I was 9 years old. That he was at an altar call and felt, I'll just do it next time. And on the way home, he got into a car wreck and died and went to hell.
Oh my goodness.
So I was raised in this very legalistic, very oppressive, very rigid, rule-bound, you do this and God will do that. And I regret that I didn't rebel like my younger siblings. I was the oldest. I think being the oldest in an Asian family is a very sad thing. I was so dutiful and so obedient, and I just was too good at following the rules. And that followed me, I would say, until a few years ago, because I feel like American Christianity is not, a lot of it doesn't work for me anymore. I'm sorry I'm saying this at an interview for a church
That's
thing.
okay. Thank you for being so honest. I really appreciate
What I
that.
mean by that, I was talking with a friend of mine, a drummer. He was raised much the same than me, and to the point like where he was playing for church, and they told him not to do like don't play outside of church. Like
Oh, wow.
I never encountered that, and I was so appreciative that New Life has been so supportive of artists. And I'm gonna have to quote him because I think this is the point of reconciliation for me with the church. He said he really disliked how the church uses God in a way that is obviously not right, saying like, this is your year. This is your year. Like they would say at the beginning of every year, like, or all things work together for the good, like really? Does it really? It just doesn't. I'm not seeing that. I'm not experiencing that. So what do I do with this? And because if I'm supposed to, because I remember one thing that's been drilled into my head, you have to thank God for your blessings, thank God for your blessings. Because if you don't, the veiled threat, then he's going to take it away, or he's going to zap you if you harbor any kind of pride in your heart or ingratitude. So he said, because if you thank God for the good, what do you do with the bad? And something I'm realizing, like, I think artists, we tend to be extremists, meaning because we have to be able to we have to be a little bit obsessive to be able to practice for hours, right? But for me, that translates into kind of a black and white kind of thinking, and it's not. Things are not causal in life. It's not just A leads to B. It's
good.
Metric. It's fifth, sixth, seventh dimensions. It's a mystery, right? And he said, God, this is how he found some sort of peace. And I was like, oh my God, I got to write that down. He said, like, God, Jesus Christ is God's stance towards us, this unmerited favor. It is all the time. It is Christ. The good, the bad that happens in life, that's just life. And it's not necessarily, we're not saying God can't bring or cause something specifically good to happen to you, but it's just life on this very difficult planet Earth. But God is with us in it. So that's where I am right now. And I don't know if that, so I don't even, that's such a loaded question for me now. Like,
Yeah.
am I a Christian? Because I don't know what that word means now in the context of this country or the church that I grew up in. I want to know God in however way he wants me to know him. The other day I felt like I said to myself, I was frustrated about something. And I said something like, okay, I'm done with this God thing and this Christian. And I felt, it was funny. I felt like the Holy Spirit was like, finally, now we can get to something.
Wow, Helen, that's really powerful. That's really deep. It sounds like you're really wrestling, as many of us are, I truly believe, especially in this time in our country.
Yeah.
It's a lot of wrestling. You kind of alluded to this, and I'm glad that you felt that New Life has been supportive of artists. And but one of the main things that I wanted to ask you was, how can the church support artists right now? What do what do artists bring to the church, and what are we missing?
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
I can only speak for myself. I think, unfortunately, I do have to speak in the general. I think artists tend to be loners in the sense we don't find a lot of people who understand what we're going through and the kind of lifestyle that we have to lead. Like before the pandemic, I was on the road all the time because that was really the only way to make a living. Like you can make a living in New York, but just playing in New York City, but it's not the type of gigs I wanted to do. I wanted to be playing concerts. So it's a very unstable life. I couldn't commit to being part of any small group, for years. And that it's drilled into my head. If you aren't part of a small group, you're failing in some way, or you're missing out, or you're gonna, you're gonna be in a dangerous position or whatever.
Wow.
So I think maybe just understanding what the artist's life is like. It's wonderful, but it's very hard. There is a lot of just making art. It requires so much time. It requires a kind of solitude that can be interpreted maybe as, I don't want to be with community, but it's not true. It's just our lives don't fit. And I mean, I understand we have to have schedules for things, otherwise everything would be a big mess. But so I have often thought, like, would there be a way to start some sort of group for artists that is not as structured, but has some sort of regularity, 'cause, I think we also need a lot of just encouragement, because artists are, I think, we live at the leading edge of human experience and emotion, and it's a very difficult place. Like those questions I said earlier about asking, do I have something to say? I mean, that's a really scary, like every time I write another composition, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I didn't think I'd ever write another song that I like, so it's, so, and opportunities like this, chances to share our art are wonderful, it's just, we need that, especially now when we're not performing, we're not traveling, we're not able to we're very limited opportunities, and maybe just chances to share our art in a way that intersect. I mean, you do that already, like bringing an artist to be a part of the worship service, or part of the Easter service, or part of Good Friday, so just being part of the thing, the whatever artistic event at New Life. But artists were really messy people too. And so sometimes it might be like pain in the behind to deal with us, but because I think artists can be very, I'll speak for myself, can be very controlling, and I want to see my vision. But if you establishing very strong, just strong boundaries, or just this is how it has to be. I think artists, we work well when there are, has to be deadlines and boundaries, and
Sure.
but just opportunities to share. I think opportunities to share our art, the encouragement, and finding a community that can work with the different way that artists live.
Wow, you just named so many of the things that I have been wanting to just
You're an artist, yes.
explore this past year. I think for a long time, especially in this role position specifically, it was hard for me to kind of venture into this world of artists, because it just felt so, it felt a little daunting, to be honest, because I didn't know. First of all, I wasn't even sure if I could call myself an artist, number one. And then to be able to try to, galvanize something with other artists, it didn't feel like, do I have what it takes? Like this kind of similar question, like, do I have something to contribute to this area? Can I really support artists the way that I think they should be supported? And so,
like, artists were like, yes, when you reached out.
I've been overwhelmed with the receptivity, to be honest. And I just realized I always knew that the desire and the need was there, but I didn't know to what degree. And so now I'm just finding that out. And interestingly enough, it took a pandemic for me to kind of be able to stop and pause and think about it, give it some real consideration, because in the past I just hadn't had the capacity to, or maybe the courage to do that. So thank you for sharing all those things, so honest and vulnerable too. You're releasing a new project soon. You've written these songs. You want to kind of talk about, how you approached the project and how you came to writing some of these songs?
Sure. Well, my quartet, and we recorded a short program of music for you guys, and I'll just tell you the music, and so you'll know what you're listening to. I'm going to start off with a piece I wrote called Convergence. It was for my most recent release called Sung with Words, where I wrote music with lyrics for the first time. But this is one of the instrumentals, and the words for this recording come from a great poet, Dana Gioia. He was one of the former National Endowment for the Arts chairman and recently a California State Poet Laureate. And he wrote a piece called Meet Me at the Lighthouse, a poem. And this piece, Convergence, is about that because he talks about meeting at the Lighthouse was a jazz club. It's still there at Hermosa Beach, California. And in his poem, I love science fiction. That's one of the and he knows two of my favorite science fiction writers, Ray Bradbury and Orson Scott Card. And so this poem has elements of time travel and but people converging at this club. So Convergence. And then I'm going to follow with another piece from that same album called In the Shadowland, which, don't worry, I'm not going to sing, but this one is also one of the instrumentals. It's inspired by a line from C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, which I think is one of my favorite books in literature. And one of the characters talks about how there's an ache in the human heart while living on this earth, knowing that we are not in our true home yet. It's life in the Shadowland. And then third, I will do Everybody's Waltz, which is one of my compositions on an upcoming release. It's my first release of a duo record, which is just me and a trumpet player, and first I'm releasing an LP. Everybody's Waltz refers to our common humanity, Everybody's Waltz, and also me just realizing, it's not just about me. And the next, fourth, is Chaos Theory. This is from my previous release called Anthem for a New Day, and this piece, when I wrote it, it's a free improvisation, which means we are improvising freely. There's nothing we're not improvising to anything, no chord progression. And when I wrote it, the term chaos theory just came to me. I'm like, why is that term? So I looked it up, and it's like a perfect description, because chaos theory is a mathematical study or theory about a set theory, where it talks about a system where, because of variables, it's hard to predict the outcome. I said, that's the jazz man.
There you go.
And then I'm going to close things out with a brand new composition that I wrote. I was commissioned by an organization called the Jazz Coalition to help jazz musicians, and they gave out small grants they wanted us to write music about our experience during the pandemic. And it's called Elegy for the City. And I wrote it for New York City, but I think it could be for any city. So thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoy the music.
I'm so excited to hear it. And I know that all of you who are watching are excited along with me. I just want to thank you again, Helen, for taking your time to record the songs and sharing your music with us, and also for speaking with me today. It's been such a life-giving exercise for me. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you. And can I tell the band members who are playing? I forgot.
Yes, absolutely.
So you will be hearing from John Ellis on saxophone and flute, and David Wong on the bass, and Kendrick Scott on the drums.
Beautiful. And so I just want to thank you again and enjoy the music. And thanks again, Helen. you.